Hello, and welcome to the finale of Worldwide Battle Royale. If you didn't see the last episode, well, then you missed out on a lot, but essentially the Yellow Alliance just took over the whole world. So with that, let's get right into the finale. So the first thing you'll notice is that there's exactly 3 countries that are not members of the Yellow Alliance. And you might think that, hey, these three countries are going to get taken out. But that's not actually the first thing that happens. No, the first thing that happens is South China proposes to North China that they reunite. And North China says no, because North China is like a big authoritarian government, whereas South China is kind of a democratic government. And North China starts having like protests, like we want a reunited China or whatever, and they decide that they are going to invade into South China. And the thing is that North China and South China are roughly equally matched. So although they get the advantage at first, this battle is going to be pretty one-sided. South China tries to make an initiative here. North China is able to have a counteroffensive that mostly pushes them back. Then South China tries pushing here. Then North China has a major offensive, and it looks like they're going to win the war. Then South China manages to force North China here. And it kind of just goes back and forth. But the big thing is they both get kicked out of the alliance because the alliance doesn't really want this kind of thing happening between its members, because that could be kind of bad for alliance politics. While this war is going on, a major union is going to take place. A bunch of smaller European countries, being Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, the Netherlands, Austria, and Switzerland, are all going to unite into a bigger country because they know that they are weak otherwise. And they know that there's going to be one country left at the end of this. Well, they don't know that, but like they feel like at some point they're going to be weakened by this. And I think I might have said Estonia was still in it at the end of the last video. I was wrong. Estonia's out. They were conquered by Norway at some point. So these are the new borders. This is I'm going to just call it the European Union, even though that's kind of an ironic name. As soon as this union forms, they do face a big difficulty, which is that the rest of the alliance votes to kick them out. And the reason these guys are getting kicked out of the alliance is simply because they're basically hedging against the alliance breaking down, and the rest of the alliance feels like that's not fair. You shouldn't be doing that. And you're kind of planning to betray us at some point. But anyway, back to the Chinese war, where it's still pretty much a stalemate, but South China has a new strategy, which is diplomacy. So while this war is going on, South China is talking to their neighbors. North China is doing a thing alongside India. India's not necessarily helping North China, but they're definitely sympathetic to the North Chinese cause as opposed to the South Chinese. But South China gets Korea to actually join the war. We'll make a landing on the Shandong Peninsula and kind of surround. I believe this is the Yellow Sea, right? This is the Yellow Sea. This is the East China Sea. So they surround the Yellow Sea, and with this, the North Chinese Navy is pretty much forced out of the East China Sea out of fear of losing it, and they lose their coastline, which is pretty much most of their population, except for Japan. And so now the South Chinese Navy is chasing the North Chinese Navy. North China will withdraw from a lot of here. And at this point, a third party will get involved in the war, as Iran, with the consent of the Yellow Alliance, but it was their idea. The Yellow Alliance didn't tell them to do this, will start invading into Chinese territories in Central Asia. And obviously, Iran is going to be able to dominate North China. North China doesn't really have anything here. North China's not even fighting back. And before long, Iran has taken pretty much all of these territories, and North China just agrees to cede them in exchange for Iran staying neutral in the future. And with that, Iran is now one of the most powerful countries in the world. But for now, let's go back to China, because South China and Korea just took this island, which I forgot what it's called, but it used to be part of Korea, then it was transferred to Russia, then to North China, and now back to Korea. The North Chinese are losing the mainland, and their government is mostly retreated to Japan, and at this point, they decide they're going to hold out in Japan and hope that they can defend Japan long enough that South China just gives up. But the Japanese people kind of start a revolt against them in Tokyo, which makes things hard for them, as the North Chinese government kind of just implodes and they stop existing. Out of fear of the Yellow Alliance, China and Korea decide to make their alliance official, and they form this new Sky Blue Alliance. And they ask any other countries if they want to join the Sky Blue Alliance. India says no, because India was allied to North China, obviously. But the new European Union says yes. Australia says yes. And a few countries will decide to leave the Yellow Alliance in order to join up with the Sky Blue Alliance. Notably, Paris does this, Iceland, and Colombia. Following these developments, joins the Yellow Alliance. And with this, nothing more can happen besides a war, so let's just get to the war that eventually happens. Basically, this war is started because the Yellow Alliance believes that the Cyan Alliance would attack them first, and so Spain launches a surprise attack into Paris. Paris was expecting it, but they didn't prepare enough, even though they were expecting it. They were saying, the fact that we know they're going to invade us means that we're going to, no. They forgot to actually prepare, and so they need to be bailed out by the Europeans, who start an invasion into Italy, where they're welcomed as liberators, as Spain loses a lot of Italy to kind of rebellion/European forces, kind of working together, but Sardinia decides to stay with Spain, and it's not worth taking it for now. However, Spain has taken all of the former country of Brittany. And now that the war has started in earnest, Canada quickly takes Iceland, because Iceland is just not worth defending even, honestly. And Colombia realizes they're in for a hard battle, but they decide to fight it out. So Spain sends troops into Colombia, as well as Brazil, as they start closing in on... they send into the main Colombian territories, and they quickly capture all of the northern part. Meanwhile, Colombia starts focusing on the south, because they know that Brazil's main population is in the south, and they take out a lot of Argentina pretty quickly. So it's relatively an even match, because Spain is not sending that many forces here, and Canada is also not. Over in Asia, it's pretty much a stalemate on all fronts, with the exception that Iran is able to take Sakhalin, as well as invade into the Russian Far East, and a small incursion into this area of, I think it's modern-day China, but it's really hard to tell at this point. I think it's modern-day China, but it's really hard to tell at this point. But this area is invaded into by China, and they do decently well, but it's not really that important. India tries attacking it along this line, but it doesn't really do anything. And then China decides to attack back along this line, and it also doesn't really do anything. So the Eastern Front is kind of stalemated. So let's go back to the European front, where Greece and Iran have kind of worked together to cut off this massive portion of Russia, and the Russian people like this. They kind of prefer the Yellow Alliance over the European Federation, or European Union, and they kind of just let these guys invade in. This island probably wouldn't actually be captured, but let's just say it is because it looks nicer on the map. And the Europeans decide to withdraw troops from here, but Spain still has to actually fight guerrilla warfare to retake Italy, so after a few weeks of trying it, they decide to not, and instead focus on ever inching closer to Paris. Meanwhile, in the American front line, things are not really stalemated, but also kind of balanced at the same time, because Brazil's major cities are all being taken, as urban warfare is meaning Colombia is not really being the nicest to Brazil, but at the same time, Brazil's doing the exact same thing, and they're kind of just exchanging major cities, and basically everyone in South America is now under occupation by someone they don't really want to be occupied by, which is fun. A massive campaign into what's really the Amazon is conducted here, with Amazonian tribes helping out massively. And at this point, Nigeria starts getting worried that they're going to lose the war, so they start sending help to Brazil. And this kind of changes the tide of war, as Brazil is able to start fighting back, liberating their own cities. And this is kind of the point where the war is already kind of over, because now, or actually, it's kind of after a massive incursion into Korea, leads Korea to pretty much lose all of their territory outside of the actual Korean peninsula and Japan. that's when the war is really over. India, facing extreme morale boost, goes in, and Australia will drop out. China is still holding on for now, but with the rest of Asia against them, they're not going to be able to hold out for long as they continue losing land slowly. And Korea is a fortress for now, but Hokkaido just got taken, so Japan's probably not. The first front to fall will be the South American front, as Colombia is fighting as hard as they can, but with Nigerian support and now Canadian and a bit of Spanish support, they can't really fight it anymore, and they completely fall. And with this, Spain can redirect some more resources to the European front, which has kind of been stalemated, as I think this is Bosnia is even losing. It's probably not Bosnia. I don't remember which country this is. They're not going to win the series. Spoiler alert. Yeah, no, they're losing. But Spain is finally close to capturing Paris, and they finally do. The UK lands troops in Norway, so that the Europeans feel the home front of the war, because outside of here, where the Russians are welcoming people in still, the Europeans aren't really feeling the home front very much. But now they are, as the Netherlands gets entered, and the Netherlands tries to leave the Union, but they don't let them. And this kind of destroys the Union's resolve. They decide to leave Italy, and Spain and Greece work to push the Italians out of Italy, or like any Italian guerrillas, as well as out of whatever this country is. I forget which country it is. This lake is Hungary. I think it's Bosnia. I think this country's Bosnia. The Germans try to leave the Union, but Sweden doesn't let them, and Denmark says, no, you shouldn't do that. And Norway, even though they're dead, kind of still does that. And then Denmark gets invaded, and the Union is kind of just collapsing politically, and so they just, they keep on fighting for a little while, but their forces aren't really effective because they don't really have a command structure. This leaves China and Korea on their own, and unfortunately for them, they're not going to be able to win this. Japan has Honshu and Shikoku taken, and then Kyushu also falls, and then the rest of Korea falls. And China is continuing to lose. An invasion of Indonesia goes extremely well because Australia might or might not be helping them. And an invasion of Southeast Asia goes equally well. And at this point, China wants to surrender, but the Yellow Alliance knows they don't actually have to accept Chinese surrender to win the war, so they just keep fighting. And it maybe takes a year more, but they're not tired of war at this point, and they want to get rid of China, so they do. So let's see what this peace treaty looks like. And it's a relatively simple peace treaty. The UK gets Scandinavia, Greece gets Russia. Russia's really mad about this, but what are they going to do? This random country, I can't remember which one it is, gets a bunch of Central Europe. Spain gets Western Europe, as well as some territory in the Americas. Brazil gets the rest. And Iran annexes all of Korea, and India annexes all of China. And now feelings are going to start to fester. The Yellow Alliance keeps breaking up, and countries no longer think that the Yellow Alliance is actually going to last. And to show this, Australia will create a new Pink Alliance. And they'll say any country who wants to join can. Any country who is tired of the Yellow Alliance and just wants to see it, dissolve, they can join. Brazil is the first country to join. Envious they didn't get as much as they wanted out of the peace treaty. Following them are Ghana and Guinea. That's a fitting pair of countries. They sound nice together. They are really small despite having won a bunch of wars. The same thing applies to Tunisia. The last country that this applies to, that will therefore take this, is the United Kingdom. Actually, no, that also applies to this Central European country. So all these countries that feel like they've been snuffed out of stuff in the peace treaties, they will all band together with Australia in one last hurrah against the system. And even further than this, Nigeria starts to get a little bit angry about Spain, feeling they feel like Spain dominates the alliance. So they will separate into their old Tan alliance that they used to have, and Gabon will also join it. And Ghana and Guinea will switch from the Pink Alliance to the Tan Alliance. And following that, Canada will decide to join the Pink Alliance. And now, there's 3 alliances, which means a war is not inevitable. But the Yellow Alliance and the Orange Alliance don't like each other. The Pink Alliance was created for a reason. The Orange Alliance seemingly was just created to spite Spain. And Spain is mad about this. Greece also isn't exactly thrilled. And while Iran and India couldn't really care less, they're willing to join in on the war because they think they'll get land out of it. And Spain and Greece have been the best of allies, I think, throughout this pretty much whole series. And so Greece will actually start the invasion of Nigeria, and Spain will shortly follow. And the Pink Alliance is staying silent for now, as Guinea gets invaded by Spain, and Nigeria realizes they were not prepared for this. They were not really defending Arabia at all, because they don't really have the capacity to. And it turns out Nigeria, despite looking big on a map, was not ever really that strong. And now the Pink Alliance is actually starting to get kind of worried, because without the Yellow and Orange Alliances distracting each other, they might be too weak. And so they decide to rush an all-out invasion of the Yellow Alliance, and specifically the Spanish claims in the Americas. And they do it extremely rapidly, taking pretty much all of the Spanish claims in the former U.S. and in the Caribbean within the first week. Then in the second week, starting a South American campaign. And in the third week, taking out the rest of North America. In that time, amazing progress has been made against the Orange Alliance, but the Pink Alliance has had enough, and they declare their support for the Orange Alliance against the Yellow Alliance, as Australia begins an invasion of Indian-held Indonesia, and therefore India decides to ignore the Western theater of the war and focus on this new front. They and Iran managed to hold this area together, but without the support from them, Spain is forced to go back to a more defensible position over here, and they decide to completely abandon their beachhead in East Africa and focus on Tunisia. A landing is made in Denmark, as Tunisia will also start invading into Spanish Algeria. However, Greece is still pretty powerful, and Bosnia is not, and pretty quickly Bosnia is just done. And Britain is not necessarily strong enough to bail them out, so Spain will make a landing in southern Britain, which will spook them into leaving the war. And with that, there's really just no way for this Central European country, that I keep forgetting which one it is, to hold on. But with the Americas done, the Pink Alliance is now shifting their focus to attacking what they deem to be the head of the Yellow Alliance, and that is Spain. And so they will start sending troops to the actual Spanish homeland. And with that, Spain will withdraw their troops from here and start getting chased back as they continue losing land in the home front, and they're starting to lose their land in Africa. Nigeria starts another front, and things are looking horrendously bad for the Yellow Alliance. Nigeria tries to reclaim Arabia, but Arabia is kind of a fortress at this point, and their beachhead fails. So for now, they're going to have to leave that. And in fact, Tunisia loses their claims in Arabia at this point. The only part of the Yellow Alliance that's actually doing well is India, as Australia starts getting pushed back. Their navy was not all that, and India, as well as with help from Iran, is able to stop this. But Iran is also now sending some troops to the Western Front to hopefully stop that, but maybe it's a little too late for that. Spain now fully withdraws any troops they had remaining in Africa to focus on the home front, and they managed to push these guys to here. But another attack is done, and they take Gibraltar. Another landing is made on Sicily as they prepare to invade mainland Italy, but for now Spain is holding that off. And Greece decides to make another attack as they start attacking into the Sinai, but they get held out around Alexandria. And now Iran is starting to help, and they help reestablish a beachhead over here against Gabon, as Gabon is even weaker than Nigeria. Nigeria is not strong, as the map would suggest. Gabon is extraordinarily weak. They're by far the weakest compared to their size. And so Gabon is just not able to defend. They lose Madagascar pretty quickly. And with Iran, basically Iran and Gabon are 1v1ing at this point, and Iran is just dominating. whereas Greece and Spain are dealing with the rest of their opponents, except for Australia, who's being dealt with by India. And when I say dealt with, I mean dealt with. And when I say dealt with, I mean dealt with, as Australia is finally being invaded for the first time, and this time they actually surrender to India, and they're willing to give up a decent amount of stuff, including Papua New Guinea and New Zealand, in order to be able to stay independent after the war. With Australia leaving the war, that gives Spain a new breath of hope, as India is now helping them, and they managed to force these guys down into the south. But the landing of Italy has just commenced, and it goes terribly for Spain as they lose a bunch of land as well as some islands, and the Roman Empire is basically reestablished under Tunisia, which is ironic if you think about it. The Red Sea has finally been militarily won by the Allies, or has finally been won by the Yellow Alliance, as they start taking over Egypt and the Nile. And Gabon at this point is like so weak that they kind of start falling very quickly, and within a month Gabon has completely surrendered, as Nigeria is also falling. They're strong, but they're nothing compared to the might of the Yellow Alliance. And at this point, Tunisia is deciding to withdraw from a large portion of their invasions over here. Not all of it, obviously, but a large portion of their invasions over here to defend the homeland, which doesn't end up working. They leave a bunch of the duties over here to Nigeria, and then they decide to fully withdraw because they're just running out of manpower, and they're managing to hold this. They're magically managing to hold a stalemate and even push it back, but that's because they're not using manpower anywhere else. And so Spain is dealing with the home front, finally dealing with it and landing in Morocco to liberate that again, whereas Greece is dealing with the troops, and finally Tunisia is out of troops. They are still doing conscription, but they have a small enough number of military-aged men that they're like actually having to worry about that, and they fall. Spain is now on the offensive and is retaking a bunch of this land, and Canada and Brazil are not able to establish anything, as the entire old world is retaken. Canada and Brazil desperately try to get the UK and Australia back in the war, but they know that they shouldn't rejoin it, as Spain retakes their islands, and Iran makes landings in Alaska to attack Canada. And Canada, this is like, again, this episode's gonna be really long, so this war probably takes years. Like from this point, it probably takes 2 or 3 years before the war actually ends, but I'm gonna speed it up because I want this video to be like with under an hour in length. So yeah, Canada will at some point fall, mostly to Iranian forces, while Spain has liberated their colony in the Americas, and Brazil is for the final time invaded and falls. Let's look at this peace treaty. At this point, there are so many colonies that despite all 4 of these countries still being in alliances, I feel like it's better to just color them in so you know whose colonies are whose. So green is Iran, purple or pink is Greece, who still controls these islands. Yellow is Spain, and dark blue is India. And at this point, there's really no hope for Australia. And at this point, 2 coalitions are forming. The European coalition, with Spain, Greece, and the UK, and the Asian coalition, with Iran, India, and Australia. And at this point, I think this is the first time in the series there has been no white on the map. Actually, that's not true. There was like a whole time when everyone was in an alliance. I forgot about that. Anyway, I'm coloring in Australia and the UK because this war is about to be not the longest war you've ever seen, that's for sure. Let's just say things don't go very well for one of these countries, and that leads to their alliance kind of falling apart. Arabia is the first area to fall, just because Iran can't really defend it well, and they also can't really defend their southern African colony very well. So Madagascar is seized, and generally Spain and Greece have an easy time cleaning this up. And you might see where this is going. It turns out Iran had a bunch of colonies, but they were not easy to defend. So the UK will seize Greenland, as well as starting to invade Canada, where they are welcomed as liberators because the Canadian people prefer the British to the Iranians any day of the week. And Spain will now also start invading into the Canadian colony. And it doesn't go this quickly, but I just kind of want to... I want you guys to be able to see who wins this episode. And so Iran crumbles. And so before their allies even have a chance to do anything, they're like, should we really be doing this? India decides, yes, we should, and they send some troops to Madagascar. And at that point, the European coalition decides it's too late for India to back out, as Iran's home territory is taken, and they surrender. Maybe a bit prematurely. India will seize Japan and Sakhalin and hope to keep fighting, invading into Korea. Australia, on the other hand, will, for one last time in this series, leave a losing coalition as they're losing the war to avoid any consequences. But at this point, India is kind of cooked, as Greece is invading them. And as this is happening, a major development takes place, as Spain stabs the UK in the back, invading them while they weren't looking, but by doing so, seizing all British territories. Greece will finish off India, and unfortunately for Australia, their chicken cowardice will not save them this time, as Greece and Spain will finish... I'm going to just color them in Greece's color, finish them off. And instead of dividing up the world between them so that they can fight each other to the death, these loyal allies until the end, Greece and Spain, they have so much in common, and they've seen eye to eye for so long, will decide rather than fighting for victory, the final winner should not be dissolved by war, but by love, as they declare the Republic of Roma Nova, and they unite to take over the entire world together. So I hope you enjoyed this series. I don't know what I'm going to be doing next, but with that, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.